Welcome to Train Signal. You're watching Reducing Single Points of Failure. We're going to talk about changing up what we call the operations masters, and we're also going to dip into how to add a domain controller with the IFM media set that we built in the last video. And by the way, I think it's important to note that this video is sponsored by the letters I, Q, and P because it's cool to be sponsored by the letters of the alphabet and by small little puppies everywhere because, well, they're just so darn cute. Alright, so let's talk about what it is in this video that we're going to be dealing with here. First of all, we're going to talk about a little bit of future planning to prevent some major problems with your network. In this section, in this video, we're really going to be dealing with issues that are not so apparent. Okay, but it's one of those things that if you don't know about, it'll sneak up and get you. Alright, we're going to be talking about these things called operations masters and how to distribute them a little bit, because then we're going to restructure the Global Mantics domain controllers a little bit to ensure that we have a little more flexibility. And really, I mean, we really are planning for failure at this point. Okay, I mean, there's no doubt about it. We've been talking about this since the last video. But your domain controllers are probably going to blow up eventually. And then when they do, we want to be ready for it. We don't want to be caught without a solution ready at hand. Okay. And also, I kind of had this as a sub point, but I'm going to teach you how to add a domain controller with that IFM media that we built from the last video. I'm not really going to produce slides about this one. I mean, I'm just going to get in there and show you how to do it because, I mean, let's face it, you already know how to install Server 2008. You know how to run DC Promo, but you don't know how to run DC Promo with IFM yet. So I'm going to show that to you. You're going to find out it's really super easy once you have that IFM media built like we did in that last video on creating backup media. All right, so let's go ahead and let's move on here. So right now, here we are. We have two domain controllers, both of which are global catalogs. Okay, so I mean everything seems fine, everything is rolling right along. But you know what? There's a lurking menace that we just don't know about right now, and that is this single point of failure. If NYDC1 takes a dive and becomes a quivering mass of metal, well, it's going to cause some significant problems in your network, and let me tell you why. Right now, we have all these things called operation masters attached to DC1. Now, right now, immediately, I know you're thinking, what is this operation master thing, Coach? I mean, you haven't mentioned this at all in any of the previous videos. This is a brand new thing. Yeah, it is. Basically, operations masters are specific jobs that domain controllers can do. Now, here's the deal. We can easily reduce the risk of a single point of failure in terms of our domain controllers by giving our DC2 an additional job or two. Now, that's one way to do it. We're going to talk about a more comprehensive solution. But first of all, I got to tell you what these operations masters are. Because right now you're thinking, yeah, operations masters, blah, blah, blah. I don't know what that is. So let's get you grounded in operations masters. They're these little hidden elements that if you don't know about them, they can cause big trouble, okay? By the way, they used to be called FSMOs, okay? Flexible Single Operations Masters in previous versions of Server. But what they are, they're specific jobs that a domain controller can do apart from all the regular day-to-day stuff. Because, I mean, any domain controller can do stuff like authenticating your users, logging them on, adding users, you know, pretty much everything that we've covered so far. But these are special jobs that domain controllers perform at certain times. Okay? Now, there's two kind of categories of these operations masters. Now, the first category is for your forest level. Everything in your forest, everything in your big network, there are two operations masters that do very specific jobs. The first one is called the domain naming master, and it's responsible for adding and removing domains from inside of your forest. Now, remember, in Global Mantics, our forest root domain is DC1 right now. Now, DC1 has the domain naming master on it, and most of the time, just so you know, it sits back and drinks coffee. It doesn't do anything most of the time until you need to add a domain or remove a domain. So if a server has the domain naming master on it and it goes down, well, chances are we're not going to need this very often. So we may not know that this particular master is unavailable until we go to add a domain. Now, there's an additional master on the forest level called the schema. Now, remember that the schema is basically the database definitions that control what's inside of Active Directory, right? So our schema master handles all the database definitions. And again, most of the time, the schema master is on coffee break until you, or let's say you're installing a network-ready application that uses Active Directory, but it needs to make changes to the schema database. Well, then the schema master kicks in and goes ahead and handles those changes. And it handles the schema for the entire forest. So if you have several domains in your forest, the schema master is going to control the schema for all of them. Okay? Now, you're only going to have one domain controller that's going to handle both of these. And just so you know, these two operations master jobs, these can both run on the same domain controller. You don't need separate domain controller boxes for these two jobs. Okay, so we can put both of these jobs on the same domain controller. Now let's talk about the domain level stuff. Okay, now if you have 3 domains, you're going to have each one of these in every domain. So let's talk about these. First of all, here is the big one, okay, the PDC emulator. Now PDC stands for the primary domain controller. While every domain controller in your domain is really equal in most of the stuff that it does, there's always going to be one domain controller that's going to be the PDC emulator. Now, this particular domain controller that has this job handles stuff like password updates, group policy updates, time updates, and it also acts as what we call the master browser. When you go to browse what's in a domain, you're actually going to be looking at it from the PDC emulator, okay? Now, if this guy goes down, if the PDC emulator server goes down, you're going to see immediate effects, and lots of people are going to be very angry, all right? So this one is a big deal. Now, just as a quick note, this particular operations master, when you need to make group policy changes, okay, you want to make sure you do it on the server that has the PDC role for the best performance, because the PDC emulator handles the group policy updates. Now let's talk about the RID master, or relative identifier master. This guy creates and provides security identifiers. These are usually known as SIDs for any new user, computer, and anything else that gets added to your Active Directory. Now, if a server that has this particular role, if this one goes down, it may not be that big a deal until you try to add a new user or computer. Now, if you're familiar with DHCP, which, by the way, by now you should be, you know that a DHCP hands out IP addresses to all of your clients on your network. The RID master, or relative identifier master, kind of does the same thing, okay, except that it hands out these unique identifiers for your different elements in Active Directory. Now, let me give you just a short definition of what a SID is, by the way. A SID is a unique identifier for an object in Active Directory. It's not that complex. And by the way, at the end of the course, I'm going to give you kind of a little bit of a more formal definition for a SID. But your user accounts have SIDs, your computer accounts have SIDs, your groups have SIDs, everything pretty much has a SID, okay? All right, let's talk about the infrastructure master now. The infrastructure master keeps on track on who's in what group. Okay? That's its primarily job. It's extremely vital, this particular master, if you have multiple domains in your forest. Now, because of that, the infrastructure master, it really should be on a server that is not a global catalog. The infrastructure master keeps track of who's in what group, but the global catalog also keeps track of that. Okay? But here's the deal. If every single domain controller in your domain is a global catalog, it doesn't matter where the infrastructure master is at. But here's the deal. If you have domain controllers that are not global catalogs looking to find out who's in what group, your global catalog infrastructure master component might actually get into a fight, okay? So here's the general rule. I want you to remember this. The infrastructure master should be on a server that is not a global catalog unless every single domain controller is also a global catalog. Which, remember, as you know, right now, both of our domain controllers in Global Mantics are both global catalogs. So it doesn't matter which domain controller is the infrastructure master or not. All right, so moving on, let's see if we can add a little more flexibility to our network right now. Okay, because we have not done anything with the operations masters, here's what we end up with. Our DC1 machine, which is also a global catalog, has all of the masters on it right now. Okay, and I mean all of them. Domain naming, schema master, PDC emulator, the RID, and the infrastructure. So that means that if this guy goes down, all of these guys go down with it. And that's not going to be fun. So here's what we're going to do to kind of help out and provide some flexibility in case of failure. First of all, we're going to take the PDC emulator master and the RID master, and we're going to put those guys over on DC2. So DC2 is really going to kind of become our main primary domain controller, or at least act in that capacity, which then leaves the other 3 masters over here on DC1. And you know what? That's going to be okay because both of our domain controllers are global catalogs. So that means the infrastructure master could be on either one of these boxes. It doesn't make any difference. However, just to give us even a little more flexibility, and I'll tell you why we're doing this in just a second here, but we're going to add one more domain controller. First of all, because we have the money, and second of all, we want to take this infrastructure master. We're going to put him on this 3rd domain controller. Now, here is the strategy that I'm kind of concocting, okay? And let me show you kind of my mindset. Let's say that this particular domain controller goes down. Let's say that DC2 goes down. Well, here's what we can do. We can take the PDC emulator and the RID masters, and we can do a process called seizing the master. And we can seize those masters, and we can put them over here. Or we can take them and we can put them over here. Doesn't make any difference. We have 2 computers, 2 domain controllers that we could use to seize those masters. And when you seize a master, you're going to retain some functionality and you're going to not have near as many problems. Okay, so you're going to see shortened downtime. Now, same thing for this guy, okay? The domain naming and schema master is living over here, and let's say this guy goes down, right? Not a big deal. We can take these 2 masters and then we can put them over here, or we could take and we could put them over here. So what we're doing is we're planning out for failure. We're planning for one of these things to blow up. Now, hopefully, they'll never blow up. It's not very likely, and not even very probable, but chances are one of these guys are going to blow up. And since we have these other domain controllers, since we're splitting up their jobs, their operation masters, when one of them goes down, we can put the operations masters that it currently has and put them on another domain controller, and we can get that functionality back that those operation masters provide. Okay, so are you with me? Does this make sense? I think you see this, and it doesn't really come home until it actually happens to you. Now, by the way, this infrastructure master guy, remember, he could go here or here. So did we really need to have another domain controller to do this? Okay, no, we really don't. We could just bounce the operation masters back and forth and seize them. So I'm going to blow up the network later on. I'm going to show you how to recover stuff. I'm going to show you how to seize these masters. In this video, I just want to set up more of a fault-tolerant situation so that way when we do get to that video, we have enough tools in place and enough of us kind of a safety net that we can grab these different operations masters and we can put them onto different domain controllers so we can still get functionality. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. First of all, we're going to go over to DC1 via remote desktop, and we're going to move our domain master, the PDC emulator and the RID. We're going to move these guys over to DC2. Okay? After we have accomplished that, then we're going to build DC3. We're going to use our IFM media, so to speed up the process a little bit. And then we're going to go back to DC1. We're going to transfer the infrastructure master back over to DC3, so that way we have a full complement of servers that can handle the different operations masters and be ready for an eventual blow up. So let's stop talking about it. Let's get over to the servers and let's do it. All right, here we are over on client 1, where we always seem to end up at, right? Let's go over here to DC1. Let's get this guy opened up. Let's go ahead and close out of this group policy stuff. It looks like I was messing around with earlier. And our Windows Server backup, which we were dealing with. And let's go ahead and let's go to the Start menu. Let's open up, wait a minute, we don't need to go to the Start menu. Let's just open up the Server Manager from down here. We're going to go into Active Directory Users and Computers. And first of all, I'm going to show you how to identify where the masters actually are at to begin with. Now, the domain masters, you're going to be able to find in Active Directory Users and Computers. The forest level masters, however, we're going to need to find inside of the Active Directory sites and services. So first of all, let's go ahead and start with the easy ones here. Go ahead and stretch this guy out just a little bit so we can see everything that's happening on this side, and we'll expand Active Directory Users and Computers and go into Globomantics. I'm going to right click here on Globomantics and I'm going to go to Operations Masters. Here are the 3 domain level masters. Okay, here's the RID, here's the PDC, and here's the infrastructure. And you notice here on the RID, it's DC1. Great, PDC is DC1. Yep, infrastructure master is DC1. All right, so now let's go find the forest level masters, and we're going to go to the start menu. We're going to go to administrative tools, and we're going to go to Active Directory domains and trusts. And here we are at the Global Mantics Active Directory domains and trusts. I'm going to right click right on Active Directory domains and trusts and select Operations Masters. And here we have in the Operations Masters, we have the domain naming master on NYDC12K8. Okay, remember we're going to leave this guy on the DC1 machine, so no problems. We really don't have to do anything here. Just want to show you where it's at in case you did want to change it. Let's go ahead and click on Close. Now let's go find the other one. We need to find the schema snap-in, so we're going to close out of Active Directory domains and trusts. Let's go to the Start menu, go to Administrative Tools, and we need to find the Active Directory schema item to find where the schema master is at. You see that there's no Active Directory schema. Well, there's a reason for that. By default, the schema master and the snap-in for the schema stuff isn't registered. So what we need to do is we need to open up a quick command prompt here, and we need to type a really fast command. We're going to add in this cute little command called reg svr. We're going to basically register on the server, space schmmgmt.dll. Now this is actually the schema management console, and again, it doesn't come pre-installed. We have to type in this cute little command in order to make it available to us. So we'll hit the enter key. Whoops, looks like I made a quick mistake here. Reg server 32. There we go. Hit the enter key, and now we have successfully registered this cute little MMC, so it's available to us. I'm going to tell it OK. And now let's go ahead and we'll close out of our command prompt. Let's go to the Start menu, and let's go to MMC. Let's go ahead and open this guy up, and let's see if we can find that snap-in available here to us. Go ahead and expand the snap-in items. Here it is. Now that that snap-in is registered on our server, it's now available to us. It's one of the few snap-ins that are not automatically available to you. Most of them are, just so you know. All right, so we've registered that DLL with the server, and so now we can click here on Add and tell it OK. So now let's go ahead and expand this guy so we can see everything that's happening here. And just be able to see all the stuff here. Let's go ahead and expand our Active Directory schema here, and let's see if we can right-click on it, and we're going to select Operations Master. And here we are. You see that the schema master is our DC1, and we don't want to change this one, right, because we're going to leave this schema master on DC1 and just let it hang out there. It's not going to hurt anything. We'll click on Close. All right, so just as a quick review, all right, just so we remember the two places where we find these different items at. First of all, our domain items are here on the Global Mantics inside of Active Directory users and computers, right? Operations Masters. So we have the first three, and these are going to be the three you're going to mess with the most, right? So we're going to close that one. We go to Active Directory domains and trusts in order to find the domain naming item here. And we find the Operations Master for the domain naming item here. And then last but not least, we just saw how to find the schema master. Remember, we have to register that snap-in in order to get to it. All right, so now you know how to find them. Let's go ahead and let's make some changes, okay? We're going to only be changing the domain masters. We're not going to mess with the forest level masters. We're going to leave them on DC1. It'll be just fine. In order to change the operations masters, first of all, you have to make sure that the machine that you want to transfer it to is actually up and running. I know, that's kind of a dust statement, isn't it? All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take the RID and PDC masters and move them over to DC2. So in order to do that, let's go ahead and let's bounce on over to DC2. We're going to minimize our remote desktop here for DC1. Let's bounce over to DC2, and let's go ahead and get in here and make some changes. Let's go ahead and go here to our server master. Open up our roles, Active Directory domain services, Active Directory users, and computers. Let's expand this out a little bit so we can see everything that's happening and going on. and we'll right-click on Globomantics. Let's go to Operations Masters now. So we actually do have to be on the machine that we want to move it to. All right, again, it has to be up and running. So right now on the Operations Masters DC1. To transfer the Operations Master role to the following computer, click Change. Well, that's DC2. Let's go ahead and let's try it. It's going to say, hey, are you sure you want to transfer this role? Yes, we are. Okay, fantastic. The Operations Master role is successfully transferred. Okay, so now the RID Master is on DC2. Let's do the same thing for PDC. Let's go ahead and let's change the role here. Are you sure you want to transfer it to, let's make sure we're transferring it to the right place, DC2, yep. We'll tell it yes. And survey says, perfect. The operations role was successfully transferred. Tell it OK. So we've completed the first part. DC2 is now responsible for the PDC, the primary domain controller emulator, right? And also for RIDs, for actually the issuing of SIDs when we add stuff to our network. So here's the deal. When we start to add users, computers, and start to make a lot of changes to our Active Directory, chances are we're going to want to be on DC2. We've been doing everything on DC1 because it had, well, everything up to this point, right? Now you can still change stuff on DC1 and even eventually onto DC3. It's going to take a little slower to take effect, all right? So if you want the best possible performance, make your major changes here on the PDC and RID Master, which is currently DC2. All right, so the Infrastructure Master is still currently on DC1, right? And that's okay for the time being, but we are going to create a new domain controller here. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to bounce on over to DC3. Now, let me tell you what I've done so far with DC3, okay? I went ahead and I installed DC3, or I installed the operating system on DC3. I have joined it to the domain. I have given it an IP address. I've done most of the basic setup, but I have not added any roles. I have not added any features. I've done very little to it other than installing Server 2008, changing the time, giving it an IP address, changing the name, and adding it to the domain. I did do the updates, just so you know, but nothing else. And the reason why I'm not showing you that is because, well, you've already seen it. And I didn't figure that you wanted to see it again. So let's go ahead and let's put a check mark here. Do not show this window at logon because we don't need it anymore. Now, you know what? Let's do a quick enable remote desktop. Just for old time's sake, we'll go ahead and we'll allow connections only from machines with network level authentication. We'll tell it OK and OK. All right, so we've enabled our remote desktop. So later on, we can go over to client 1 and add a desktop shortcut for that. But you know how to do that too. Let's click on close. And that's going to bring up our server manager here. And we're going to go ahead and install the Active Directory domain services binaries onto this machine. So that way we can eventually use DC Promo. And we can actually turn it into a real live domain controller. Let's go ahead and skip this page by default and tell it next. And let's go ahead and install the Active Directory domain services and tell it next, and install. And I'm going to pause the video while this guy finishes up doing its installation. And when we come back, we'll run DC Promo. We'll use that IFM media to bring it up to full speed. All right, well, just so you know, that didn't take very long at all. Actually, it took a little less than 5 minutes to install the binaries. Let's go ahead and let's run DC Promo by clicking on the link. Again, don't forget you can always go to the command line and run DC Promo too. Now, in order to do the IFM thing, we're going to need to use advanced mode installation. So let's do that. Tell it next. And we'll read that later. Tell it next. And we're going to be creating a new domain controller in an existing forest. So no big deal there. Let's go ahead and we'll tell it next. Here is the domain we're going to be bringing it on to. That'll be good. We're going to go ahead and use my current set of credentials, globomantics.com/supercoach, because, well, it's what I'm logged in with, because I went ahead and joined it through the domain. I can select the domain here. Yeah, it found it. Fantastic. I'm going to tell it next. I'm going to be putting it in the New York site, so that's good. We'll tell it next. Now, here's a question. Do we want it to be a DNS server, and do we want it to be a global catalog? Well, let's go ahead and let it be a DNS server, but we're going to ace the global catalog thing because remember, we want this guy to be our infrastructure master. We can always make it a global catalog later, just so you know. But for right now, we'll go ahead and leave that off, but we'll go ahead and leave it be a DNS server. And we'll tell it next. And would you look at that? This domain controller that currently hosts the infrastructure master is also a global catalog server. In a multi-domain environment, hosting the infrastructure master role on a global catalog server can cause problems. Unless all the other domain controllers in the domain are also global catalog servers, right? Hey, you know what? I think I mentioned something about this. So it's actually telling us, hey, you know what? We can go ahead and transfer the infrastructure master role right now. Yes, let's do it. I don't have to do more work than I have to, so let's go ahead and have it do that. And now it's giving us a little warning that said delegation cannot be created. We want to go ahead and we want to tell it yes, and we will let the domain servers figure it out amongst themselves, okay? All right, so now we can either replicate data over the network from an existing domain controller, but we're going to use IFM. We don't want to have all of that transfer going over our bandwidth. So we're going to replicate data from media at the following location. Now then, here's the problem. Our IFM media is hanging out over on DC2 right now. Now we could go ahead and we could browse. Let's see if we could find it. You know, we don't have a shared folder on it anyway, do we? Most of the time, here's what you're going to do. You're going to take that IFM media and you're going to burn it to a CD-ROM. And you're going to install your domain controller stuff from that CD-ROM. Now there's another way that we can do it too. Tell you what, let's go ahead and let's bounce on over to DC2. And what we're going to do is we're going to share that IFM folder real quick. So here we are over on DC2. Ah, the magic of virtual machines, huh? I'm going to go ahead and turn network discovery on and file sharing so that DC2 can actually share files. We'll close the network here, and here we are at the IFM. We're going to right-click on IFM, and let's do a quick share. I'm just going to leave myself as the owner on it, and that should be fine. Let's go ahead and click on share so it's actually available to me over the network. So let's see if we can reach it by typing in //nydc22k8 IFM. So let's bounce back on over now to our DC3 server, and let's try to connect to that shared folder. Now, right now you should be thinking, Coach, what are you doing? Why are you transferring this? Why are you copying it and pulling it from the network? It's because I didn't burn a CD-ROM. That's why. Okay. So just so you know, that's really the reason why I'm doing that. Normally, what I really should do is I should be burning a CD-ROM. All right, I'm going to tell it next. Oh, look at that. It's telling me, hey, you know what? You can't do that. You have to do this from a local machine. All right, well, so now you see that we cannot pull it from a shared folder, can we? So really what we should be doing is burning a CD-ROM. You can't be lazy about this. Now, I'm going to show you one more trick, just so you know that you can actually accomplish this here. I'm going to go back to the desktop here. I'm going to go to the computer, and we're going to click up here. We're going to go to //nydc2 2k8 /IFM. And again, this is kind of cheating, especially if I didn't burn a CD-ROM or a DVD like I really should, right? I'm going to create an IFM folder over here on my local disk C. And now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to shrink this window down a little bit so I can see my IFM folder over on DC2 and my IFM folder over here on local disk C. Let's open up IFM. And we're going to cheat. We're going to grab all of this stuff from DC2. We're going to drag and drop, and we're going to copy it over here onto DC3. All right, so now let's go back to our Active Directory installation. And now let's do this. Let's type C:/IFM. Okay, and we'll tell it next. And now it's able to go ahead and follow along with the rest of the process. Now, what we need to do next is we need to choose a replication partner in the domain. Now we can let the wizard choose the domain controller we're going to use. Let's go ahead and let's use DC2. Okay. Remember, DC2 is our PDC emulator and our RID emulator. Since we only really have 3 domain controllers in our network, and they're all connected to the same network switch, I'm going to go with the one that's going to be running the PDC. Does it make too much difference which one you select? In this situation, not so much. Okay, but I'm going to go with DC2 since it does have that big boss PDC emulator running on it, and we'll tell it next. All right, here's our standard where you're going to be putting your stuff. I'm just going to leave it all in the defaults. Tell it next. Now I need to create the directory password. Let's go ahead and let's export the settings. Do we need to? Probably not, because you know what? We're going to be adding in all of our stuff from IFM anyway, so I'm going to skip the export the settings. But my Active Directory stuff is going to be copied primarily from the IFM folder, so I don't have to worry about replication back and forth between this domain controller and DC1 or DC2. Now, quite honestly, we don't have that much in our Active Directory. So in this case, I'm kind of going a little overkill on how much I need to be doing this, but I wanted to show you how to actually perform an IFM installation of a DC. All right, did you hear all those acronyms? You think I could string a few more together? I think I could, but you know what? I'm trying really hard not to. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll tell it next. And now it's going to sit and spin, just like we've seen before. Let's have it reboot on completion. And our new domain controller is going to be up as soon as this guy's done. We don't even have to go back and transfer that infrastructure master. Why? Because when we went through this wizard, the wizard found out that, hey, the infrastructure master is on a global catalog. I'm not going to be a global catalog, so I want the infrastructure master. We went ahead and transferred it lickety-split. So while this is doing its thing and copying all the stuff over from our IFM folder that we kind of cheated, right? I mean, normally what we should have done is we should have burned it to a DVD or CD-ROM, depending upon how big the size of the folder was. But we cheated and we got the job done. So let's go ahead and let's pause the video. I'll be right back as soon as this guy is done doing its thing. All right, so here's DC3 after the reboot here. Let's go ahead and let's do just a quick login to make sure that everything was installed A-OK real fast. All right, let's double check to see where our stuff ended up at here. Let's go to the computer and let's go to the local disk C. By the way, right now we could probably delete the IFM folder because we don't need it anymore. So we'll just delete it real quick, just for security's sake, and I should probably go back and remember to empty the recycling bin too, right? Let's go into the Windows folder, just like we did the first time that we installed a domain controller. Let's go into NTDS, and here is the ntds.dit database. That's a good thing. So our Active Directory database did get copied over from the IFM folder. That's a beautiful, wonderful thing. Let's go into the roles section now, and let's just make sure that we do have our Active Directory domain services up and rolling here. There we go. There's ADDS, and let's go ahead and expand it, and let's make sure we can see Globomantics here. All right, looks like everything came on over A-OK. Let's go into the users. Yep, all right, we even got our users back on over here. Hey, real quick, let's make sure that our domain controllers are still all friends and talking to each other, right? So let's do our repadmin /sync all to see if anything weird is happening here. Sync all terminated with no errors. Hey, beautiful. That's a wonderful thing. All right, so let's type exit. And my friends, we are in good shape. We have successfully added this third domain controller using IFM. We have transferred all of our masters. Hey, you know what? Let's take a look at that real quick. Let's go to Globomantics, Operations Masters. All right, RID Masters DC2, that's good. PDC, DC2. Infrastructure, DC3. All right. I don't know how much more success we could need other than that. So let's go ahead and let's bounce on back to the slides, and let's wrap this guy up. All right, so in terms of our domain controllers and our restructuring of them, this is where we're at. We saw every step of the way, so everything is good to go. Let's go ahead and let's talk about just a couple of big words here. Remember that the operations master is an assignable role or job for a domain controller that only one domain controller can do at a time. Okay? That's kind of an important part there. Only one domain controller can do at a time. Sometimes you'll hear this term called multi-mastering, meaning that multiple machines can do the same thing. Well, with these operations masters, that's not the case. Only one domain controller can do that particular job at a time. Security identifier, let's talk about that for just a second. It's a unique value that's assigned to an object in Active Directory for identification in an Active Directory-based network. Big surprise there, right? Now, this SID might be assigned by a domain controller using SIDs generated from the RID master, right? From our relative identifier master. But SIDs may also be created by an operating system in the case of computer accounts and simply grabbed and pulled in and used by Active Directory. So just a couple of words to remember out of this particular lesson. So let's talk about what we covered. After viewing this video, you should now be able to at least describe a little bit about the 5 different operations masters. You should be able to identify what server has been assigned what operations masters, and I've shown you the different places to go do that. And by the way, there's like 5 or 6 other ways to figure those out. Okay, I just showed you the easy ones. I've shown you how to change operations masters, and remember that we have to be over on the other domain controller to do that, to pull the operation master from one to the other. So your domain controllers have to be up and alive in order to do this in the right way. I've shown you how to create a domain controller using IFM media. Most of the time, by the way, if you're going to be using IFM media, you're probably going to be taking a domain controller, installing Server 2008 on it, burning a DVD or CD-ROM with the IFM stuff on it, and then shipping the computer and the disk with it to that other location. Now, we didn't really need to do the creation using IFM, but I think it was an important stop-off and just a little bit of a tweak in terms of the DC Promo Wizard on how to actually get that guy up and running using that particular methodology. Well, that wraps this one up. So, tell you what, I'm going to see you in the next video where we're going to start talking about doing more maintenance type based stuff. We're going to talk about auditing your Active Directory. We're going to talk about defragging your Active Directory. So there are a bunch of little tasks really in the next video that's just going to help you kind of keep your fingers on the pulse of what's happening with your domain controllers and such. So I'll see you over there.